Emma had always been accustomed to long phone calls with her mother, usually brief check-ins filled with updates about the weather, work, or small worries that felt familiar but distant. They lived in different states now, and while they still talked frequently, those conversations had become predictable, surface level. Yet nothing had prepared her for the call she received late one evening. A phone call that would change everything. "Emma, it's Mom." Her mother's voice was weaker than usual, her words slow and deliberate as though she was conserving energy. "Need you to come home." Emma immediately frowned. "What's going on? Are you okay? You sound different." There was a pause on the other end, an unnerving silence that filled the air, before her mother spoke again, softly but with urgency. "It's something important. Something I needed to tell you, before it's too late." Her heart sank. "Mom, you're scaring me. What's going on?" There was another pause, longer this time, before her mother finally answered. "I'm not well, Emma. The doctors don't know how much time I have left. And before I go, I need to tell you something I've kept hidden for so long." A deep breath shuddered in Emma's chest. Her mother rarely talked about serious things. She was always the optimistic one, the one who reassured Emma that everything would be fine no matter the situation, but this felt different. "What hidden thing?" Emma asked, her voice shaking. "What have you been keeping from me?" There was another pause, this one longer, before her mother finally spoke, her voice shaking slightly. "Your father isn't who you think he is, Emma." Emma blinked, confused. "What do you mean, not who I think he is? Of course Dad is my father." "No," her mother whispered, "I mean, he's not your biological father." Emma's heart thudded hard in her chest. "What? What are you talking about?" "You were born under different circumstances," her mother continued. "And your real father, he's someone else. Someone I've never told you about." Emma's breath caught. "Mom, this doesn't make sense. How can that be? I've always known Dad. He raised me, loved me." "I know," her mother said softly. "And he's been a wonderful father to you. But before I met him, before I married him, I had a life you never knew about." Emma sat down heavily, gripping the edge of her kitchen counter. "What are you saying? Who's my real father?" Her mother hesitated before speaking again, her voice shaking with emotion. "There was someone from another city, someone I was close to. I never told anyone about it, and after you were born, things happened. Decisions were made to keep it all quiet. Your father, your real father, is someone else entirely." Emma couldn't believe what she was hearing. "You're telling me there's another man out there? Someone I've never met?" "Yes," her mother whispered, "and I'm afraid you've been living your life without knowing the full truth." For a long moment Emma was silent. Her mind was reeling, struggling to process what she had just been told. It felt surreal, like something out of a novel. Her father, her real father, was someone she had no idea existed. "Why didn't you ever tell me this before?" Emma asked, her voice hollow with disbelief. Her mother sighed heavily. "Because it was complicated. Because I thought it was for the best. You had a good life, Emma. You had a family who loved you. Why shake that up? But now you're saying I have another family? Someone else out there?" "Yes," her mother said softly. "And he's alive. I've kept in touch with his family from a distance, but I've never been able to fully bring it into the open. I was afraid of what would happen." Emma sat back in her chair, trying to absorb it all. "What happens now? How do I even begin to find this man?" Her mother took another deep breath, her voice trembling slightly. "I've made contact with someone, an old friend from back then who knows where he is, but it's risky. It could change everything." Emma's mind was spinning. a new father, a new family. Everything she had ever known about her own identity crumbling right in front of her. She felt lost, confused, and yet, deep down, she knew she couldn't ignore this. She had to know. "I need to go home, Mom," she finally said, her voice steady but with a tremor beneath the surface. "I need to be with you." Her mother's voice softened, a mixture of relief and sorrow. "I'll be waiting. But Emma, I'm not sure how much time I have left. You must come quickly." That evening, Emma packed a small suitcase and made the flight home. The next morning, she arrived at her mother's house. It was a quiet, suburban home, one she had visited many times before, but this time the air felt heavier, weighted by the secret her mother had revealed. When she walked inside, her mother was sitting in the living room, pale and frail, but still strong. "I'm so glad you're here," her mother said, a weak smile on her face. Emma hugged her tightly. "I'm here, Mom. I'm not going anywhere." They sat down together on the couch, and her mother reached into a drawer and pulled out an old envelope. She handed it to Emma with trembling hands. "This is the first step," her mother whispered. "Inside is the name, the place where he lives." Emma opened the envelope slowly, her heart pounding. Inside was a name. Mark, a simple name written on a piece of paper. There was an address in another state and a phone number. This is the key," her mother said softly. "But be careful, Emma. This could change everything." Emma's fingers trembled as she held the paper. "I know where this will lead, but I have to find out." Her mother reached over and took Emma's hand gently in hers. "Whatever happens, know that I love you, and this doesn't change who you are to me." Emma nodded, swallowing past the lump in her throat. She knew it wouldn't be easy, this path of discovery, but it was something she couldn't ignore. And so, with a mix of curiosity and fear, she made a decision. She would follow the clues. She would find out the truth. And her life would never be the same again. Emma's heart was heavy as she stared at the slip of paper in her hand. The name, the address, the phone number. Mark. It was a simple, ordinary name, yet it felt like the key to unlocking a life she never knew existed. Her mother's words replayed in her mind, whispers of secrets, of truths buried beneath years of silence. She sat down on the edge of her bed, gripping the paper tightly. How did she even begin? How did she go from someone who thought she knew everything about herself to someone chasing after pieces of a past she never knew existed? Her mind swirled with emotions, shock, confusion, excitement, but also fear. What if this man didn't want anything to do with her? What if this caused more pain than healing? She had always thought she understood where she came from, who she was, but now everything felt fragile and uncertain. And she decided she couldn't put it off any longer. She had to make the call. Emma's fingers hovered over the keypad of her phone, pausing before she dialed the number her mother had provided. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. The moment felt surreal, like she was about to speak to someone who could potentially change everything she knew about her life. The phone rang once, twice, and then a deep, steady voice answered. "Hello?" Emma's heart skipped a beat. She could hear the hesitation in his voice, confused, unsure. Was this the right person? "Hi, is this Mark?" she asked softly. There was a pause on the other end, followed by a hesitant, "Yes? Who's this?" I'm Emma," she said, her voice trembling slightly. Your daughter." Another long silence. It felt like time had stopped, like the air between them had suddenly frozen. Then Mark's voice broke through, hesitant, but full of disbelief. "Daughter?" "Yes," Emma whispered. "My mother. She told me about you, that you're my father." Mark inhaled sharply, his breath audible on the line. "What are you saying? I don't understand." "It's true. Emma continued. "I just found out. My mom said. She never told you about me, but now she's ill. She's asked me to find you." For a moment, all Mark could do was listen, his mind reeling. A daughter? Someone he had never known about? The words hung heavily in the air between them, too much for either of them to process immediately. "Are you sure?" Mark finally asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. "Yes," Emma said softly. "My name is Emma. I'm your daughter." There was a long pause before Mark finally spoke again, his voice quieter this time, filled with cautious hope and deep uncertainty. "I don't understand. Why now? How did this happen?" "My mom? She never told you?" Emma explained. "She said it was something she kept hidden because she was afraid. But now, she's sick. She wanted me to reach out to you." Mark took a deep breath, as though trying to ground himself. I don't know what to say. This is unbelievable." "I know it's a lot to take in," Emma said gently. "But I just wanted you to know. I'm here. And I wanted to meet you." Another pause. Then Mark spoke again, his voice quieter this time. Where are you? Can I come to you?" Emma's heart leapt at the question. "I'm in my hometown. I'm here now. You can come to me, if you want to." Mark's voice trembled slightly. "I need to process this. I need some time. But I'll come. I'll come and meet you." Emma hung up the phone, her mind spinning. It felt surreal. She had just spoken to her biological father, someone she had no idea existed until a few days ago. Now he had agreed to come. He was coming to meet her. It was the start of something new, something that would change everything. The hours that followed were filled with nervous anticipation. Emma cleaned her apartment and tried to distract herself with mundane tasks, but her mind kept drifting back to the conversation. A man she had never met. Her father was coming into her life. How would this change everything she thought she knew about herself? Her mother had told her once that the past had a way of catching up to you, whether you wanted it to or not. And now Emma was standing at the threshold of that truth, about to face the reality of a family she never knew she had. That evening, as she sat on her couch, the sound of a car pulling into the driveway made her heart leap. Her mind raced. Was this really happening? Was this him? Emma walked to the door, her breath catching in her throat. She opened it slowly, and there he was. Mark stood there, tall and steady, his eyes scanning her with a mixture of curiosity and caution. They locked eyes, and for a brief moment, it was as if the world around them faded away. "Hi," Mark said softly. Emma swallowed hard, trying to keep her composure. "Hi." They stood in silence for what felt like an eternity, both unsure of what to say, how to begin. Then Mark took a step forward and extended his hand. I'm Mark," he said. Emma took his hand and shook it gently, feeling a strange mix of warmth and nervousness. "I'm Emma." The first meeting was tentative, filled with unease and unspoken emotions, but it was only the beginning of something neither of them could have ever anticipated. As they sat down in Emma's living room, the conversation began, a slow, hesitant unraveling of years of questions, doubts, and truths. Mark shared his life, a life that had moved on without the knowledge of Emma's existence. He had built a family, a life far from the city where Emma had grown up, and yet here they were, two people meeting for the first time, each a reflection of someone neither had expected to see. Emma listened intently as Mark spoke, his story, his dreams, his regrets. There were moments of silence, moments where they simply watched each other, trying to absorb what was happening, and slowly a connection began to form, fragile at first, but undeniably real. They began to build something from nothing, a tentative bridge between two lives that had been unknowingly intertwined for so long. It wasn't easy, it couldn't be, But it was a start. And in that moment, Emma knew. This was the beginning of her journey, one that would lead her into the heart of her past, where love, loss, and family would collide in ways she never imagined. That night, as Mark left her home, they exchanged numbers, promising to keep in touch, but neither fully knew what the future would hold. Would this new connection bring healing, or would it tear their lives apart? Emma sat in silence, staring at the empty doorway. Her thoughts were a whirlwind, her head spinning with everything she had learned, everything she had yet to understand. But one thing was clear. This was just the beginning. The confession had been made, and now the journey had truly begun. Days had passed since Emma's unexpected meeting with Mark, but the weight of that encounter hadn't left her. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face, the calm expression, the hesitance in his voice. A father she never knew existed, now a part of her life. The reality of it all was still settling in. He was out there, someone who shared her blood, who had unknowingly shaped parts of who she was. And after Mark had left her home, Emma had spent hours lost in thought. She couldn't shake the feeling of emptiness that gnawed at her. There was still so much she didn't know. How did her mother never tell him about her? Why did her family hide her existence from Mark all these years? She needed answers. Not just from her mother, but from Mark himself. But first, she knew she had to do something. She had to search. Not just for answers, but for more clues about this man she had only just met. She had to dig into his life, his past, see where the puzzle pieces fit, and where they didn't. The next morning, Emma sat at her cluttered kitchen table, laptop open, notebook beside her. She'd already spent hours scrolling through the few pieces of information she had. The name Mark, the city he lived in, the general area where he worked. But it wasn't enough. She needed to dig deeper. She needed real facts, connections, something concrete. Her mother hadn't spoken much about his life. All she knew was that Mark had settled in another state years ago, far from where Emma had grown up, and built a family of his own. He had married, had kids, and worked in a successful profession. That was it. No other details, no stories from the past that might give Emma a better understanding of who he was. Emma knew she had to start somewhere. She opened a search engine and typed in the few details she had: Mark's name, the city he lived in, and vague mentions of his occupation. She didn't know what she was hoping to find, but she knew she had to begin somewhere. The search results came back: generic listings, work profiles, social media accounts. It felt like trying to find a needle in a haystack. The challenge was overwhelming. How would she know if what she was looking at was real? How would she know if she wasn't just chasing dead ends? Still, she pushed forward. She opened each profile, analyzing the pictures, scanning through words, looking for something, anything, that might link back to Mark. Hours passed, and she hit a few leads: Mark's professional association at his job, a few articles about the company he worked for, old photos someone had posted from a vacation. Emma meticulously saved each piece, writing down notes in her notebook. She couldn't afford to miss anything. Every detail could be a key to understanding him better. Her heart raced as she clicked on a Facebook profile. His wife, according to the tag beneath the picture. She quickly clicked on the woman's name, scrolling through her photos, trying to find any trace of Mark in their shared life. And then she saw it. A picture of Mark holding hands with a woman and two children standing in front of what looked like their house. A family photo. Emma stared at the screen, breath caught in her throat. This was it. This was real. A family he had built. Something she never knew about. It wasn't just stories anymore. There they were. Him, his wife, and their kids. She kept scrolling, unable to stop. More pictures of family vacations, birthday parties, school events. Mark smiling, holding his children, standing beside his wife, looking happy. And there she was. The woman, his wife. She looked kind, soft, motherly. standing with him in most of the pictures. Emma's chest tightened. She hadn't imagined this. Mark had built a life completely separate from what she had known. But the deeper Emma dug, the more questions arose. She began noticing little things, details that didn't quite match up. In the captions of certain pictures, there were hints of something more. A subtle sadness behind Mark's smile in certain family shots, an air of distance in his eyes during certain moments. Was it just her reading too much into it, or was there something more to their story? Something hidden beneath the surface? Emma leaned back in her chair, rubbing her temples. This wasn't going to be easy. She had found his family, but now she had to figure out how to approach him without disrupting their lives. What would Mark think if she just showed up? Would he even want to talk to her? She sighed and looked down at her notebook. A plan was forming. She needed more information. She had to find a way to reach him without disrupting the life he had built. She needed to understand him, what had shaped him, how he saw his life now, and how he would react to learning about her. Later that day, Emma began drafting an email, a simple one, yet carefully worded. She didn't want to come across as someone invading his life, but she couldn't pretend this wasn't important. Her heart raced as she typed, each word feeling heavier than the last. Subject: a message from your past. Dear Mark, I hope this message finds you well. My name is Emma, and I believe we have some connection, something I recently learned about. I'm your daughter. I understand this may come as a surprise, and I want to apologize if this feels sudden or overwhelming. I recently discovered information about my biological father, and after reaching out to my mother, I learned about you. I know this might be difficult to accept, but I wanted to reach out and introduce myself. I'm not here to disrupt your life or cause trouble. I simply want to get to know you. If you're willing, I'd love to talk and see where things might go from here. Please don't feel pressured. Take your time. I just wanted to give you the opportunity to make contact if you're open to it. Best regards, Emma. Emma sat back, reading over her words, heart pounding. Was she being too forward? Too cautious? She knew she couldn't predict Mark's reaction, but she had to try. She had to give him the chance to decide. Before she could second-guess herself, she hit send. The next few days were a waiting game. Emma kept checking her phone, refreshing her inbox, hoping for a response. But nothing came. At first she tried to brush it off. Maybe Mark needed more time. Maybe he wasn't ready to process this yet. But as the days passed, the silence grew heavier. Her anxiety began to build. What if he didn't want to respond at all? What if he rejected her before they even got started? Finally, on the third day, she got a reply. Subject: response. Emma, I received your message. This is unexpected. I wasn't sure what to expect when I opened your email, but I didn't expect this. You're my daughter? To be honest, this is a lot to take in. I need some time to process this. More than just a few days. I wasn't even aware that something like this happened. But thank you for reaching out. I'll think about what you've said, and if I feel ready, I'll contact you again. Mark. Emma's heart sank at first. It wasn't the response she had hoped for. But it wasn't a rejection either. He had acknowledged her, he had read her message, and he was willing to consider it. She took a deep breath, feeling a mix of relief and apprehension. It was progress, even if it wasn't immediate. And now, she had time to wait. Time to think. Time to wonder, what would happen next? Days turned into weeks, and still Emma waited. She spent her time trying to stay occupied, going back to work, spending time with friends, keeping her mind busy. But no matter what, her thoughts kept drifting back to Mark. Would he reach out again? Would he want to move forward with her? And then, just as she was starting to think she might have to give up hope, she saw a notification on her phone. A new message. Subject: another chance. Emma, I've thought a lot about what you said, and I realize I don't want to ignore this. I don't want to pretend this isn't real. You're my daughter, and I need to figure out what this means. I'm coming to visit you. I want to meet you face to face. Let's talk. Let's figure this out. Mark. Emma's heart leapt. This was it, the moment she had been waiting for, the chance to finally speak with him again, and this time face to face. Her journey to understanding her past was far from over, but now, finally, she was about to take the next step. The days leading up to Mark's visit felt like a whirlwind. Emma couldn't focus on much else. Her mind was consumed by anticipation and nerves. It had been weeks since they had first connected, and now, after all that time, they were about to meet again, face to face. She had spent countless hours imagining what it would be like. How would he look? Would he be the man she had envisioned in her mind? More importantly, how would this moment feel, the first time they truly spoke, without the safety of a phone screen? Emma tried to distract herself, throwing herself into work and spending time with friends, but the thought of their upcoming meeting was always in the back of her mind. Her heart fluttered whenever she thought about it. Finally, the day arrived. Emma had planned to meet Mark at a cafe in a neutral location, someplace quiet and public where they could have a conversation without distractions. She wanted to make sure this moment wasn't overwhelming, wanted to give them space to ease into this new dynamic. She arrived early, finding a seat by the window. The cafe was cozy, warm lights, comfortable chairs, and a soft hum of background noise. Emma ordered a coffee and sat quietly, her eyes scanning the entrance, waiting for him. Minutes passed, and then she saw him. Mark walked through the cafe door. Tall, calm, his eyes scanning the room until they landed on her. Emma's breath caught in her throat. There he was, her father, the man she had spent countless nights thinking about, wondering about, now standing just a few feet away from her. They locked eyes. For a moment, everything seemed to stand still. There was a quiet recognition between them, a shared familiarity despite never having met. Emma could see traces of herself in his face, the same brown eyes, the same subtle smile. Mark approached slowly, his footsteps measured, cautious. When he reached her table, he paused for a moment, taking her in. "Emma," he said softly, almost as if he couldn't believe it. "Hi, Mark," she replied, her voice steady but filled with emotion. They sat down, the space between them heavier than words. Neither spoke immediately, unsure of where to start. The cafe buzzed around them, but to Emma it felt like a private world, their world, where only they existed in that moment. Finally, Mark broke the silence. "I wasn't sure this was real," he admitted, his voice quiet. "When I read your message, it didn't feel real, but now, seeing you, it's hard to process." Emma nodded, trying to find the right words. "I know, it's a lot to take in. I wasn't sure how to reach you, how to even begin, but I wanted to tell you, I had to let you know, that you have a daughter." Mark looked down at the table, his fingers nervously tapping against the wood. "I never thought something like this could happen. I didn't even know. I had no idea." "I know," Emma said gently. "My mom never told you. She kept it hidden. Everything. I didn't even find out until recently." Mark lifted his gaze, his eyes meeting hers. She never mentioned anything? She never told me?" Emma shook her head. "No, she didn't. I don't understand why. Maybe she was scared. Or she thought it was for the best. I don't know. But when she fell ill, she finally told me. She said she wanted me to find you." Mark's expression grew pained. "She kept you from me. All these years. I didn't even know you existed." "Yeah," Emma said quietly. "It wasn't fair to you, and it wasn't fair to me either. The weight of the conversation pressed heavily between them. It wasn't easy to have this discussion. The years of separation, the emotions bubbling just beneath the surface. But Emma could see that Mark was struggling just as much as she was. He wanted to understand, but he didn't know how. "Why didn't she reach out to me?" Mark asked again, his voice filled with confusion. "Why wouldn't she let me know you were out there?" "I don't know," Emma said, sighing. "That's something I'll never understand. But I'm here now, and I wanted to know you." Mark nodded slowly, taking a deep breath. "And you want to know me, after all this time?" "Yes," Emma said firmly, "I do. I want to know who you are, what your life is like. I need to understand this. What happened and why I wasn't a part of it." Mark's eyes softened, and for the first time he seemed to relax slightly. "I want to know you too," he admitted. "I never thought something like this could happen. Finding out I had a daughter, I have a family I never knew about." They fell into a quiet moment, the air between them still charged but less tense. Emma could see the conflict in Mark's eyes, the struggle between the man he was now and the man he used to be before life moved on. She could tell he was wrestling with his own emotions, trying to piece together the life he had built and the life that had been kept from him. "I never wanted this life to come between me and my family," Mark said after a long pause. "I've built something with my wife and kids, something I thought was complete. And now you have me," Emma finished gently. Mark sighed, his eyes reflecting a mix of frustration and resignation. "This changes everything. I don't know how my family will react, how they'll feel about this. I never wanted to hurt them." "I understand," Emma said softly. "I don't want to cause problems for you or your family. I just want to understand. I want to get to know you." Mark gave a small smile, one that was genuine but filled with uncertainty. "You're a part of me, Emma. No matter what happens now, that won't change." They continued talking, sharing stories, memories, and thoughts. Emma asked about his life, his work, his interests, and slowly she began to piece together the man sitting in front of her. The kind, thoughtful, yet guarded man who had built a life that didn't include her until now. But as the conversation deepened, Emma couldn't shake the nagging feeling that there was something Mark wasn't fully telling her. Something unspoken lingering just beneath the surface. His words, though kind, carried a certain hesitance, as if he was holding back. She couldn't tell if it was fear or something else, something more personal. "I want to meet your family," Emma said after a while. "I want to see where you live, your life. I want to know more about you." Mark hesitated. "That's complicated. My wife and kids, they're my world. I don't know if they'd be comfortable with someone like you, someone who just showed up out of the blue." "But they deserve to know," Emma pressed. "They should know about me. I'm a part of your life, whether you like it or not." Mark looked conflicted, torn between his loyalty to his current family and the desire to embrace this new connection. He glanced down at the table, taking a deep breath before meeting her eyes again. "Let me think about it," he said quietly. "I need to figure out the right way to do this, how to explain everything to them." Emma nodded, understanding that it wasn't going to be easy for him. She didn't want to force him into anything, but she wasn't going to back down either. This was too important. She needed answers, and she wanted to see the life he had built, a life that included her, even if it had been unknowingly until now. They sat in silence for a few moments, each lost in their own thoughts. The cafe was quiet, the conversation between them subdued but real. Two strangers forging a connection that neither had anticipated. "Thank you for meeting me," Emma finally said. "I wasn't sure if you'd come, but I'm glad you did." Mark gave her a small smile. "I'm glad too." But as they stood to leave, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning, a beginning that would lead them into deeper, more complicated territory. She could see the uncertainty in Mark's eyes, his desire to protect his family, his hesitation to completely embrace the daughter who had suddenly appeared in his life. And she knew, as she watched him walk away from the cafe, that their story was far from over.